I'm Megan, and I am a documentary wedding filmmaker. I recently got the chance to work with Dehancer and test out their plugin. When Dehancer reached out to me initially, I was super excited to review this plugin as I use a ton of different vintage aspects in my wedding films, and so I thought this was the perfect opportunity and the perfect thing to add to just elevate my films. So I'm gonna dive into a few of the settings that I've used in my wedding films so far and kind of just go through everything that I've used and what works for me. I'm not super well versed in this plugin yet, but I look forward to learning more about it in the future. So let's jump on Dehancer and take a look at what it has to offer. So jumping into Davinci, this is kind of what my note tree looks like on a day-to-day basis. I go ahead and color before I add the plugin on, just to change different exposure, contrast, to set my white balance, all of those things, and my skin tones. And then I will jump into Dehancer and kind of play around with that. Dehancer does have some settings that allow you to manipulate exposure and temperature. However, I do not use those. I usually color my footage ahead of time. Something that really impressed me is just right off the bat, the input settings. I do work with Blackmagic and Sony cameras, so this is super helpful for me when I am toggling between the two. So I'm gonna go in, this is Sony FX3 footage. They have all of the different Sony cameras, and I'm gonna choose my camera. Here was what I was mentioning about the different exposure, temperature, tint settings that they have. You can manipulate these in the actual plugin, however I do not do this. They are kind of helpful to just do things in a pinch when you are just trying to see a specific look. So moving down to film, this was where I was really impressed. I was not actually expecting all of these film profiles, and in no shape or form am I a film guru. I do not know all of these film profiles, but I was extremely impressed for someone that has shot on film before, just the vast options that they offer and all of the detail that went into this plugin is super cool. I typically gravitate towards the Fuji color plugins and just kind of see which ones look best for their skin tones and kind of the look that I am looking for. A few of them are more saturated, a few of them are more contrasty. It really just depends which one that you are using. I'm gonna go ahead and add that one. Moving down, this is typically stuff that I manipulate in my other notes like I was mentioning before. So I typically do not mess with these. I don't mess with these. Here's where I kind of pick up again, the film grain. So I typically gravitate towards 35mm film. I typically don't add a whole lot of grain just to my normal footage, but when I'm using this plugin specifically, I will bump up the grain a little bit more. So that is always awesome to have that capability just built in to affect the amount. So I'm gonna jump to a clip that you can kind of see it a little more clear, enabling halation. You can kind of see it around the edges of the officiant in these white drapes. It definitely adds to the film look. And then going down to bloom, it has that glow effect without adding the glow in Davinci. I typically don't go super overboard for this. Sometimes I don't use it, especially with daytime footage. I find that it's just a little too much. Jumping down to film damage, this is also definitely a choice of style. I sometimes do not use this. You can go in and change the different profiles. It adds jitter and it also adds the film damage, and you can see it kind of in there. I love the jitter effect. It really adds to the gate that I'm going to add in a little bit. Going down here, this is what the bread and butter is typically for me. The different gate types. These are super cool for different looks that you are trying to get. Obviously, there is your typical Super 8 look. Here's the standard 16mm, Super 16mm, Ultra. There are many options. Something that has been super helpful to me, especially with social media, is you can change the film orientation. So if you did want to do a vertical crop, you could crop it here and use these for stories, for reels, for TikToks. So that is something that is super cool to me. I typically use the Super 8 and I'm typically using the vertical film orientation for my final films. So another thing, when you do add the film gates, these different options, the bloom, the halation, do affect this. You can kind of see it on the left there. I also got the chance to test out Dehancer's iOS app, and I thought this was a super cool option if you're not at your desktop to actually sit down and edit. As you can see, there are a ton of different options of film as well in the app. I also thought this was super cool that they had a photo option as well, so this kind of doubles as a film emulation for photo. So the only thing that I will say, I did have a little trouble kind of navigating the app. I think this might have just been a me problem because I honestly just didn't even think to look at the top, but I was scrolling a little bit at the bottom trying to figure out where to go after I actually added my preset, but it's just the edit button at the top. Once you click on edit, you can actually go in, you can crop, do everything that you usually can do on different filter apps that you have, and adjust the exposure, the different temperature as well. You can see there's a lot of different gate types that you can choose from. And then here I dropped in a video just to see the video capabilities on this app. The only issue that I had with this is that I was having trouble getting it to play an app before exporting it, as I am actually trying to click the play button, but it is not loading. It does only give you an option to export in 1080p. However, if you're using this primarily for Instagram Reels and stories, this shouldn't be an issue, as Instagram does compress 4K quality videos to 1080. So it doesn't really matter if you're not exporting in 4K in that circumstance. I do see myself using this a lot on Instagram. I do think this is another cool opportunity to show different sneak peeks on Instagram stories as well as Reels. I will say, as a filmmaker looking at this, I really am pleased with how realistic it looks and just the element of what it adds to my films. And even just using this as an effect on your footage itself, I've found that without the gate films that you use, it really just adds a different look to your footage. As you can see here, that looks a lot different than this. I definitely think it could be used for a lot of cool short films that I'm doing in the future, as well as music videos. I had so much fun diving into Dehancer. I also have a code in the description for 10% off Dehancer. Thanks for watching.